Hey, John, welcome back. We're doing another exciting edition of Sermon Notes. Are you excited?
Ooh, bring it.
Hey, so we didn't catch up last week, so we're going to kind of do a mashup this week. We did Hebrews 12 2 Sundays ago, and that tied in with our confirmation that was going on. Big Sunday, and then yesterday, or just a couple days ago, we did Ephesians chapter 2, which just happens to be like your favorite passage. Is that right?
Love that passage. So if I could pick one passage to talk a little bit more about, it would be, in fact, Ephesians chapter 2. But today I want to start with Hebrews 12 because I also like order, and I also like going in order. So the order of the 2 weeks were Hebrews 12 was first. And if you'll remember, that passage talks about running with endurance. And it is known as one of those passages that is familiar because it has this phrase, because you are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. And so I wanted to clear something up. I want to see if you could help me, Sean. So people wonder and question, is it true that these great cloud of witnesses, they're actually in heaven just cheering us on? They're in heaven watching us and saying, watch out, watch to the left, and saying, great job, good job for what you're doing. Can they, in fact, look down from heaven and see us?
I have no reason to believe they can. None. And I hope they don't either, because, there's a lot of, we have this great gift that God's given us to block out a lot of the brokenness around us and to focus on the good things. But man, heaven's supposed to be like so much better. Why would you watch this old rerun of This Broken Life when you could be in the glory of God? And so,
what a great point.
Yeah.
The great point. Well, as I did some study in it, it's also, the answer is presumably no, because there are no other references in Scripture to people in heaven looking down at people on earth and cheering them on in any way. So I would just say otherwise in the Bible, there's not a pattern or an illusion that people are doing that. So,
well, you mentioned the word illusion. The whole idea that we're made in the image of God. He put something in us that's in His image. Why look on the copies or the sort of the renderings when you could go to the original? And they're in the presence of the original. So that's to me, that's a beauty aspect, a qualification that just says, why would we? Yeah. Even if we could. And I don't believe we can.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. It's good stuff though, right?
It's good stuff, and it's good to think about, what does that mean? And so in the text, just to clarify what we do believe, and really more importantly, scholars that are smarter than personally me would say is that the cloud of witnesses are meant to be a testimony. They bear witness to what a life well lived looks like, because the sentence, verse 1 does start with therefore, and we learned in seminary when therefore begins the sentence, you need to see what it's there for. And so you look back. And so if you look back, it's the chapter that many call the chapter of faith, or the heroes of the faith. And it talks about the faith of these men and women who have gone before us, and their example is what's cheering us on. Their diligence, their faith.
Which is a perfect tie-in to Ephesians 2:7, and this whole idea that, God is doing all this stuff that Paul talks about in the first 6 verses of that chapter. So God can point to us in all future ages as examples of the incredible wealth of His grace and kindness toward us. So it's like we, in our obedience and our faith and in God's grace, get to be a part of that great cloud of witnesses eventually. I like that. I find a nice connection point, a symmetry there, maybe a thread that connects those two.
Yeah, and as we talk about the runners, I guess you could say endurance, and that you're called to be a runner. You're called to give the Christian life all your effort, to run with all your might, to run in a way to win the prize, Paul says in other letters. But that being said, the encouragement to believers oftentimes is, to fight the good fight, to do your part. But then in Ephesians 2, it says, hey, look, you were dead and you could not do anything to be made alive. You want to unpack that a bit?
Yeah, that's that whole dead aspect, and you did a good job of this, is just really hammering the fact that spiritually there was nothing. I mean, you were done, right? You're totally cut off, and God is the one who brings that animation, that life, that beautiful thing that gets to be our spirit, into righteousness and into life. And so, we're dead, right? And so it's God's grace who initiates that run. It kind of brings us to the starter line of that and allows us to go forward.
Question I have for us is, one, Hebrews 12 calls us to run, to do it with your might, your energy, your focus. And then it says, have your focus on Jesus, the author of our faith. But then Ephesians 2 says, you're dead. You cannot get out of that spot. God has to make you alive. Could you address maybe how those two passages even conflict in, my effort or God's effort?
Yeah. So, I mean, God's the one who initiates it. And then we get to participate alongside of God. What I like about the Ephesians passage is it removes all the pretense that I'm somehow able to present myself before God based on my own merit. There's no pretense of that. Dead is dead, and so the idea that without God, I've done nothing. I can't run. I can't witness. I can't pray. I can't teach my children the goodness of God. Without God, I'm dead. And what's beautiful about this is we get to come before God because of God, and then we can bring our gifts, we can bring our talents, we can bring our effort. But all of that is a response. Yeah. It's not initiated by us. It's our response to God.
Yes. I wrote down something I've heard before, so this isn't original to me. But grace isn't opposed to effort.
That's right.
Grace is opposed to earning. Grace isn't opposed to effort.
I like
it's
that.
Opposed to earning. And I've heard that before. I stole it. But anything you hear me say that you think, that was good, John, just take note. I probably heard it.
You're a good listener.
But... yeah. What the reason why I'm thankful for that is because there is a responsibility that John O'Leary has, that Sean Hornsby has in the Christian faith. But the responsibility doesn't rest on my perfection or my getting it right. It rests on what Christ did on the cross on my behalf, which frees me to then live out these good works that he's talking about later in the passage. It frees me to live those out knowing, hey, God started this in me. God's going to give me fuel to do this. God's going to work in me. And you know what? He initiates and goes before me in this. And so what I do is I just respond to say, Lord, I need you. Go with me. I want to be your workmanship.
And that's where we get to that beautiful, I keep saying beautiful. I'm channeling my inner Brian here. That opportunity to be exactly what we're called to be, the reflection of God's ministry, God's work, God's ability to create life, to redeem where there is death.
Yeah, let me ask you about that. Yeah. We are called, we are commissioned, so to speak, to reflect God's character. How do you think we do about that on a weekly basis? How's that going for us?
Depends on what day it is in my life. I can tell you, I struggle with that, right? And again, we get to go back to God's grace in this part and say, okay, I messed a lot of that up. Okay, God, get me back on the right path again.
That's right. It makes me think of, I say to myself, and maybe in the inner recesses of my heart and head, I say, well, look, I went to church. It's pretty good. I tried to do a few good things. I wrote that $23 check to the little club that asked me to support them in their summer trip, and then I served as a greeter at church, maybe, and you said hi to a lot of people, and you think, I'm doing pretty well, and I just go back to, yes, that is good, and we want to spread good, but I go back to, hey, the calling is so much more than a couple
just being
hours,
a nice guy,
a couple minutes, or being a nice guy or gal during the week. But my role as a believer in Jesus, in fact, is to be a disciple or to be a reflection of Jesus, and I'm thinking, wow, that's way more than just greeting on Sunday. Which, by the way, we should greet or serve somewhere on Sunday, but it's way deeper than that. And sometimes I think I give myself too much credit for doing that when I've got to buckle down and focus and kind of keep the main thing the main thing.
Yeah. I was reading this just in the last couple of days about something called apostolic passion. This one guy was writing, I think McClung was his last name, and it was the idea of like passion being something that we're willing to suffer for. In apostolic, of course, the apostles were messengers. So this whole idea that for the apostles, their apostolic passion meant that they were willing to go into the world to people who hadn't heard the good news yet and suffer so that they would hear the good news. It didn't mean they had to suffer, but they were willing to go suffer. And I just look back and I'm like, okay, how many times am I willing to suffer? I mean, sometimes I'm just like, oh, I don't want to do this, and I might go. And other times I'm like, that might be hard.
Yeah.
And I think of like, what are we passionate about? Like, are you passionate? A lot of people, and I'm just going to use this because it was current, right? Because we could joke about it Sunday. A lot of people were passionate about going to Jazz Fest or the Garth Brooks concert. And so they suffered through long lines and waits. They suffered through spending a little money. They had to shell out some dollars to get those tickets and to get in there. And that's not bad. But what else are you passionate about? So those are things that we believe so much in that we'll go and do that. Like I don't do those things. I don't do concerts, but I'll go and pay money and travel 4 or 5 hours to another town to go spend the night carrying heavy things around, doing a rucking event, an endurance event. I'm passionate about that. I'm willing to suffer, like literally we suffer, doing physical activity and stuff. So what are you passionate about? And then how does that passion equal to your passion for God? And I think that really comes into this running the race, what Paul talks about, or what the Hebrews author talks about in chapter 12 is like run the race with endurance. Well, endurance means you're pushing the limits. I mean, that's not just run the race when it's convenient, but you're willing to push past the point of exhaustion because this is worth suffering for.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And just to continue on in that same point in a different light, and that is that I think too often we wrestle with, I want to do good and be good, and I'm not trying to earn favor with God, but that's exactly what I'm doing. I mean, I don't mean to do it, but that's exactly what I'm doing. And so there is this.
We just want to prove we're worth it.
That's right.
Yeah, we're like, hey, God, we know you did it, but I still need to prove I'm worth it.
Yeah, God, I know you got me in the house, but I need to make sure I keep the house clean. And there is truth in that. But ultimately, Jesus paid 100% of my falling short. Not most of it, and then I got to finish the rest. He did all of it.
No matter how hard you work and I work, we're never going to prove we're worth it.
Yeah, and no matter what I do, it doesn't make God love me any more, or what I don't do doesn't make Him love me any less. And I would say too often I get stuck in between do and grace, or legalism and freedom. And then I think, where's a good, let me call it balance? Mm-hmm. My answer is, if you are running the race as fast as you can, for a marathon, it's not a sprint. So fast for you could be, I'm disciplined day in and day out. That's my goal. To keep for me, I'd be pretty fast mile pace, 11 or 12 minute mile pace. And if you're wondering, that's actually not fast at all. But let's say I'm committed to keeping a pace of 12-minute mile, which, by the way, nobody's going to hear that I run a 12-minute mile and think, well done, young man, except for the fact that I'm running. Okay, they'll say, well, good job trying. But if I keep a good pace, that's my calling. But I got to remember that my calling is to keep a good pace because I want to honor God.
That's right.
And so one of the ways I said in my message was, we live from acceptance, not for acceptance. Mm-hmm. And so in this race, I'm running because I'm accepted. I'm not running to get accepted.
That's right.
And to me, that changes everything.
It does, because then your actions and your motivations are that of adoration. I just want God to know I love Him. I just want God to know that the gratefulness I feel inside of me is enough to where I want to live it on the outside. Yeah. And it's not like, God, okay, I saw what you did, and I'm going to give back to you because, it was worth it, and I want to prove myself. No, it's like, no, God, you're awesome, and you've invited me into something special, and I want to be a part of it.
Yeah, it's like I said in my message about my teenagers. A lot of times they do what I ask them to do because they have to.
They have to.
They must. And it's a different attitude when you must and then when you want to. It's just a different attitude. And so I think how I want to really link the two messages together are we have a responsibility, but it's God who initiates it, it's God who fuels it, and it's God who carries the burden of, are you good enough?
Yeah.
And the answer is yes, in Jesus. When you surrender to Jesus, you're good enough. But apart from the work on the cross, you're always going to miss the mark and fall short.
Yeah. Hey, so you didn't do a lot with the whole passage about Satan or the devil, as it talks about in verse 2. When we talk about, and I just wonder if people out there are struggling with this, especially because we've hammered this idea that we were dead, and it's God who initiates. So how does God break that? If the devil is the one who, the commander of the powers of the unseen world or of the air, depending on your translation, is at work in the hearts of those who refuse to obey God. So what does God do to intercede in that, in your understanding? How does God get in the middle of that? Because I think we probably, and I hope if you don't, that you do run into somebody who's lost. And because this is important to me. It's like, let's not just share the good news with those who know the good news. Let's share the good news with those who desperately need to hear good news in their life. And so how would you kind of talk to people about what that means for God to initiate something in someone who's completely disobedient to God?
Well, the passage helps me with this because it says, you were dead, you couldn't do anything about it, you were following the prince of the power of the air.
Yeah.
But God, who is rich in mercy, because of his great love for us, made us alive with Christ. So one thing I focus on there is that God's initiation has a ton to do with the fact that he's so merciful and he is so full of love. And so God is about redeeming that which is unworthy about being redeemed. Romans 5:8, I used it a couple times in my message. While you were still sinners, Christ died for you. God didn't find you and redeem you when you were doing well. It says, while you are still a sinner. Yeah. And so I just want to know, God is all about finding a mess and redeeming brokenness. Yeah. Thank goodness that's a promise. Gosh, it's got to be several hundred times in Scripture that he takes brokenness and makes it whole.
Right.
So my focus on how does God get in the middle of that is God does what no one else will do. And maybe that's not literally because maybe other religions claim that their God will do things. But I think that what Christ did, God sent him, God the Father sent him, what Christ did really does hinge on, hey, I want to show you how much I love you by drawing near to you and coming to earth and taking on flesh. And so we have a God who does want to draw near to us. So he's not afraid of your sin. He's not afraid of your brokenness. He's not afraid of your mess.
Yeah.
Thank goodness that God wants to find me in my mess.
Yeah.
Because what if he didn't? I mean, if I had to clean up before God found me, just talk about
hopelessness, right? Because we're dead to it. I mean, verse 3, I don't know which one of these is my favorite, but verse 3 is up there. It's like all of us used to live that way, following the passionate desires and inclinations of our sinful nature. By our very nature, we were subject to God's anger. And then Paul, I think he adds this in there for folks like me, just like everyone else. And so if you are listening or watching and you're wondering, well, how do I reach my lost friends? How does God interject this presence of holiness in the middle of disobedience? My answer to that, I think, is like he does it through us sometimes. I mean, sometimes he calls us to be present. And so if you have somebody who's lost and you're concerned about that, then I would invite you first to pray for them. Like, hey, God, how can I'm concerned about this person and I want them to hear the good news. How can I be a part of that? Is that something that you can use me for? And then the other part is like, don't give up on them. I think sometimes we fall into our Christian circles and we remove ourselves and sort of detox of the world. And that's not a bad thing to have places we can go where we can be around like-minded, spiritually minded people who promote accountability and holiness and all the things that we enjoy in the fellowship. But don't remove yourself from people who need to hear good news, because you might be the person who brings that good news.
I love it. I love the encouragement to us. And so what do I do with the passage? Find people that need somebody to pursue them and initiate God's love. Again, not your love. You're initiating God's love to them. So look for somebody to be patient with. Look for somebody who needs God to speak into their mess, and continue to invite them into what God has for them. Because I will say this, when people are dead, a lot of times they don't even know they're dead. They're just dead. They're meandering around. That's another translation.
Use that word. That was good.
Yeah, they're meandering in what they're doing, and they don't know how dead they are. But when we continue to call them to light, that is our role to remind them, to encourage them that there is a better way. Just like Christ stepped in and reminded us, hey, there's a better way.
Yeah.
And I want to give you that way, not because you deserve it, but because of my mercy. So the passage hinges for me that it's not about anything that I bring to the table, because I, for so many years, thought I brought at least a little bit to the table. My discipline, my good works, my niceness, I didn't do anything really that bad growing up. But then when I realized really it's not a point system, it's not a 10 points you're good and 3 points you're bad. It's a grace system, and it's, I got you, I found you, I'm going to make you alive. I'm going to initiate that, and then your job is to say, oops, help. Actually, way more than oops, like to say, I surrender, I need a Savior. Now I want to walk as what you're calling me to walk in, as a workmanship. In the good works that you've created, which again has always blown me away. That verse about God has actually created good works for me to walk in. Who created the good works? He did.
Yep.
And what do I need to do? Again, still surrender and just walk. It's good.
Yeah. The point system is this: it's either 100% or 0, and if I don't have 100%, I have 0. And the only one who had 100% was Christ. And why are we this masterpiece? Or what was the word your translation had?
Workmanship.
Workmanship, yeah. It's New Living Translation. So we can do the good things He planned for us long ago.
Yeah, He planned long ago.
And I wonder how many of you watching and listening are thinking, I wonder what good things God planned for me to do. And it's time. This is a great time to get off the bench and to go do good things for God.
And good things that God's created you to do. So,
that's right.
So you may be different than me. You may be in a profession like I just got back from the doctor, taking my daughter to the doctor, and the nurse there was doing her role of giving a shot or medicine.
Yes.
And not everybody's called to do that, but if you are that nurse, do the best job to your best ability to be a caretaker and a giver of medicine that helps somebody get better. If you're the receptionist, be the best receptionist with the best smile to welcome me in my time of pain. If I go to the doctor, a lot of times I'm in pain. So be patient with me when I'm fumbling for my insurance card. Be patient with me as I was telling you the convoluted story while I was late, maybe. But either way, do the best to your ability. Why? Not to get points, but because you want to display God's goodness and love and grace for them.
That's right on. That's good stuff.
Good stuff today.
What else you got for this? Anything else?
I think my main thing is if you're questioning whether it really is on you and maybe it's too good to be true, I continue to just ask God to reveal, pray, ask God to reveal that to you. Lord, is that really true? Is there any way that can be true? And then find somebody you trust. Maybe it's a pastor, maybe it's a friend, and say, tell me more about the goodness of God. Could it really be that good? And then finally, I'd say it's okay to wrestle with these kind of questions because it's a big deal. It's an important thing. It's the most important thing.
Yeah.
But if you've never heard that, then just begin to ask God, hey, could that really be true in my life? And maybe you've believed something you did, it was really dependent upon you. And I would just encourage you that if it does depend on you, then begin to make a list, all the bad things you do. And remember, bad is things like selfishness, pride, slothfulness. Maybe it's an unkind thought.
Envy.
Or an intention of the heart.
Yeah.
And if you start adding all those up with then maybe all the really good things you do. Maybe I was patient. Maybe I didn't envy and I didn't do this. If you start adding those up, if you can come ahead most days, then I think number one, you don't have a great list. But really, I think you'll realize that
the game is rigged. Is that what you're saying?
I think a bit, because I think we're prone to wander and leave the God we love. But just begin to make a list and go, wow, that's a lot to keep up with. And I'm thinking, Lord, thank you for making this to where I could not feel like a failure all the time as well. So that's my couple cents.
Yeah. For me, it would be simply, if God did not do all of this for me just to make me feel good about myself.
Yeah, that's good.
God did all of this in my life so that I could be a blessing to others, so that I could point the way to God to others and show them.
Great point, and maybe this will help. The point of life, a lot of times we think the main character is us. And if we can learn that we've never been created to be the main character, Jesus is the main character, that will really help us out. If we know I'm not the main character.
I'm not.
It's not about me.
I am a bit actor in this very big drama. So good. Awesome, man. It's good. All right, so rock and roll. This is a good episode. You're. I said all I need to say. You got anything?
I'm great. I'm just really, really thankful for what God did, despite me, for me, not because of me. Yeah.
Well, Mother's Day's coming up, and we're rolling into May and summer, and so maybe we'll change the setting a little bit. Maybe we'll have a little fun this summer, and sermon notes will continue.
Let's do it.
All right.
That'd be great.
Thank you all very much for your time, and if there's anything we can do for you at the church, by all means, please reach out to us. The easiest way is to text or call, but text is great, 318-217-8383. And if you would like for us to pray about something, just send the word pray, and you'll get a quick form that'll go to us. If you want us to contact you, then just say, hey, I'd love for a pastor to reach out to me. If you want John specifically, then say, please tell John to call me. If you want me, then you can reach out to me, Sean Hornsby. Yeah. But the point is, we are excited about just being able to share this good news with others, with the ministry that we do here at First Methodist. And 318-217-8383 is a great way to connect with the church. All right. Thanks a lot. We'll talk to you later.